course, told you I shut my sounds off, didn't at all. Here we go. Okay, we're back again, this time with a bit of a better camera than the last time. I'm not holding a cell phone. We've actually got a whole stationary thing here, so hopefully everybody can see what's going on and can have a pretty good look at everything I'm doing here, so that when I'm explaining stuff, it's not all in vain. Anyway, so we're just going to get right to it. This is the third TR-8S video that we've done, probably the best looking one, like I said, because it's not with a cell phone camera. But today we're going to be talking about making a beat from scratch, and we're going to be covering a lot of stuff. So I'm basically going to be going through and answering, just covering everything that I can, answering some questions that were asked on our YouTube and Facebook page, and showing how to import samples, which is a thing that I haven't really seen a whole lot of, and I thought that people may enjoy it, and this may be a way for everybody to decide whether they want to buy it or not. Personally, I think it's a great drum machine, has its quirks, some things that I'm hoping that Roland will be able to fix in some updates, but we'll touch on those further as we go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to initialize the patch, and then we're going to scroll through to go to a blank kit, We'll pick some drums. I'll import some stuff. I've got an SD card already in there that has some drum samples on it. Sorry about the cord. And I'll show you how it imports in, how you can find them easily. I'll show you how to get through the different categories of the machine so that you can find all the tools necessary to make your beat making experience fulfilling and easy, straightforward. And let's just get started then. So anyway, the first thing we're going to do, like I said, is we'll initialize the pattern because there's already a pattern in here. And actually, I'd like to slow down the beats per minute down to around 105, just because I'm more into the hip-hop flavor of using this machine. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is we're going to go to Utility. And if you hold down Shift, you can actually change the top category. That way you don't have to scroll through. Like when I first started using this machine, I didn't realize that Shift would jump you through it, so I would end up going like this to get to everything, which can end up being a huge pain in the butt. So yeah, for anyone that's wondering, in any of the windows that have a category or a grouping at the top, you can just hold the Shift key and you can flip through to see the different categories. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go to Utility, and we're going to go to Initialize, and we want to initialize our pattern, and we're going to scroll over with the wheel, or the knob, rather, and select OK. So our pattern should be blank now. Yep, nothing in there, and as you can see, all of the variations and stuff that were in there are lost. So the next thing that we're going to do now that our pattern is blank is we're going to select a kit. Now, hip-hop is a kit that I've made. I already have a couple of kits in here where I've imported samples, like the CR-78 kit is a bunch of CR-78 samples that I've imported already, and at some point I can kind of show you what that's like. I've got Lindrum LM1 in here as well, and just some new disco drums that I'd set up. So we're going to select number 91 right now just because it's a blank kit, and we'll hit enter on that. Actually, no point. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to select our kick drum. So we have to decide whether or not we're going to use a sample for the kick drum or we're going to use an instrument for the kick drum. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I just was told that the volume was a little low on the drum machine, so I apologize for that, and I will turn that up a bit. Hopefully you guys can hear everything fine now. So the first thing that we want to do, for the kick drum, I'm going to select just an instrument kick that we've got in here. We're going to hold down Shift. See, you can select the categories like that now. Start John kick drum, so not super necessary, and you can use the pad to see what they sound like if you want to just get a little bit of a demonstration. I mean, there's a whole plethora of different Roland drum machines in this, of course, with the updated ACV technology. But they've also given you a bunch of like odd and quirky drums, things that they've added effects to. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in here. So just for the sake of argument, we're just going to go with the classic 808 drum. And so the next thing we're going to do here is pick a snare. And it's the same idea. We would go through our instruments. Automatically, we're set to snare drum just because by default it's going to throw you on the 808 snare with the initialized kit. Okay. Now I'd like to get some samples in here as well. So I'm going to show you just now how we're going to import some samples off the SD card. I'll show you where they land when they first get imported and how you can move them and put them in groups so that they're easier to group together and keep nice and neat in there rather than just having a bunch of imported samples everywhere. So first thing you want to do to import samples on this is obviously you want to have your SD card with some samples on it. I got some off the internet. I mean, obviously samples are everywhere nowadays. So I just stuck it in my iMac. And I guess before I do anything, it should be said when you're putting samples on your SD card for this, it tells you in the owner's manual for it and online on Roland's website, there's actually a folder structure, a directory structure that you have to have beforehand. I believe it's, to check the book, but I believe it's like Roland, and the first folder needs to be called Roland, the second folder is called like sample, and then the folders within that, you can have a bunch of folders within that contain your different samples. And the nice thing, a nice feature on this is you can import individual samples, or you can just select a folder and import a whole group of samples at once, which is awesome if you've got a whole other drum machine kit that you'd like to bring in, for example, the CR-78 or the R8 or Lindrum or whatever. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Utility, and we're going to go to, hold down Shift, and we'll go to our Sample section. And you see we've got import and delete and category name, and you can optimize your samples. There's some various functionality in there. I'm not going to get too deep into that right now, but if that's something you want to look into, you can definitely download the comprehensive manual for it, or the manual that comes with it is actually pretty good. It's not the usual piece of toilet paper that Roland likes to give with their gear. You get quite a few pages of very helpful information. So I'm going to go to import. And this is where it'll ask you, do you want to import a file or do you want to import a whole folder? Now in my case, most of my samples are already grouped into folders because I took the time on the iMac to just keep everything clustered together just to make it easier, and it makes it super easy when you want to import a bunch of them at once, like I said. So we're going to just select enter on folder for now, but just so you know, you can import them individually as files. So I've got a few different drum machines in here. Like I've got a sequential drum tracks drum machine, and I really like the clap sound from the drum tracks. So let's bring that in. So we just say, would you like to import that folder? I use the knob, scroll over to OK, and you hit enter, and then you let the magic go. Now, if your samples aren't cut exactly to length, you can edit the start and stop position of any of the samples on this machine, and the nice part about it is you can use the pad to listen to it as you increase and decrease the length of the start point or the end point. So now that we've imported our samples, imagine the first question is, where do you find them? So in order to find them, you just select sample, and you hold down shift, and you want to scroll all the way over counterclockwise, and it'll take you to the category called import. Now you see DT Cabasa, DT clap, DT close hat. So those are the drum track samples that I just imported in front of you. And you can hear some of these are a little bit harsher or louder than I expected them to be too. So I apologize if you guys are getting hammered with loud and annoying noises. But hopefully it sounds great on your end. But the velocity-sensitive pad really makes it easy to listen to what you're going to play. I mean, the other alternative is you can select instrument play and do it the exact same way. But I like having the velocity. Just adds a little bit more depth, especially when I want to hear whether I'd like it to be quiet or loud. Okay, so we'll go back to sample. So if you don't want them to be in this import category, which I can understand it would be annoying, and I can show you if you scroll all the way to the end, like I have CR-78 as a kit, and I also have the Lindrum there as well. So if you want to get your samples categorized like that, it's pretty simple. The first thing you want to do is you want to create your category. So back to utilities under sample, you'll see that there's a category name. And you can go through, and they've left a bunch of empty slots. So I have the Game Boy kit is one that I actually deleted. I want to rechop the samples up. But we'll take over that space for now. Actually, it's a good way for me to show you how to erase letters, because that was one thing that I found to be kind of annoying. And then it turned out there was a really easy way to do it. So if we select it, it's going to let us edit the name of the category. So now initially I thought that I would have to scroll backwards and go to a blank space, and you use the nudge left and right to move back and forth, move your cursor back and forth. But if you want to delete, you just leave your cursor in the first spot, hold down your shift key. Shift is very crucial on this machine. It actually brings you to a lot of your submenus, and also brings you just to a lot of very quick shortcuts to make your workflow easier. So in this case, we're going to hold down Shift and you hit the copy key or nudge minus, and that deletes the name out. So in this case, we can call it, we'll just call it drum tracks. So D, just go through this. Try to do this as fast as I can for you. And also, when you're selecting a letter, I know I'm actually doing it kind of the long way. If you want to go from capital to lowercase, that Shift key again, that helpful Shift key, helps you flip through the characters, uppers and lower cases. So that also makes it a little bit easier to get to where you're going, and also you can see it speeds up your workflow quite a bit. Oops. Unless you're a little too hasty like me and you select the wrong. There we go. Now I know I could put sequential in front of it. Honestly, when you're picking names on this thing, it's better off to keep them shorter because the screen doesn't display a lot of characters. So it's easier to keep a shorter name to find stuff because you'll end up getting part of the name and dots or the name cut off. So in this case, we're just going to call it drum tracks, and that's all there is to that. So we'll go back to samples, and we're going to hit Shift, and then the sample button takes us to the edit window for that sample, and you can see where you can set your start and end position on the sample. I know that these samples are already cut well, so I'm not going to bother with that right now, but just to give you an idea, if you select enter on that, you can change the length. And also holding down Shift on this will make the number drop significantly faster. Like I said, the Shift key is super important for shortcuts in this machine, so if you're working with one or you're potentially buying one, just remember that Shift key is pretty much going to end up being your best friend. So we're going to scroll down, we'll get out of this, scroll down to where it says category import. We're going to select that, and then we're going to hold Shift down, and we're going to scroll down to where we created our drum tracks category. And then all you do is hit enter, and then sample, and it will say, do you want to write? Now I know it takes a minute. You got to spend a couple of minutes with it sorting through it, and you'll see it automatically moves me down to the drum tracks category, and there's the dots that I was talking about. So you scroll back, hit Shift sample again. It automatically will bump you back to right to the last setting that you were on before with your previous sample. So it does take a couple of seconds out of the time, but using Shift again is going to be your best friend. I'm just going to try to go through this as fast as I can now that you've seen how it's done, just so I can move on with this. Keep hitting that enter key too many times. Almost there. I found it funny that a lot of the videos that I had watched before I bought this of Roland demonstrating this didn't really show anything about sample import or categorizing them or anything like that, which you think would be something that they would cover right away, given that the biggest addition to this is that it's a TR-8 with a sampler. Yeah, no, I thought that was kind of funny. So we're almost there now, just a couple more. I know this seems like a pain in the butt, and it kind of is. And you know, I mean, if there was an easier way to do this, I wouldn't be against it. I'm sure that maybe there'll be an update for it that takes the tediousness out of categorizing your samples like this. like the ability to directly import to a category would be nice, rather than having to import to an import category and then move everything over. It'd be nice if I could just say, import this folder to this category. So Roland, if you're listening, that'd be an awesome feature for this, and I'm going to talk about, as we go through the video, I'm going to talk about a couple of other things that I would like to see possibly change in an update if possible. One left. Okay, so that should be it now. Oh, one more, I guess, that I missed. There we go. So now we've got our drum tracks category, and that just contains all the drums that I've just imported. So just for the heck of it, we might as well just use the sample drums that we just brought in. So select bass drum, hold down shift, scroll to our drum tracks category, select kick, snare drum. We're going to scroll to the same thing. I'll stop getting so repetitive here, and I'm just going to fill these instrument spaces up with these drum track sounds. I'm going to just use the traditional slots for the labeled Roland drums as much as I can anyway. Okay. My clap at, there it is. Closed hat. Open hat. Okay, so go to TR-8S. We'll just start placing some drums here. Let's shorten that close hi-hat up because it's ridiculously. I'd also dial the volume down on it a bit. There we go. So let's get some ratcheting rhythms in there as well. So we'll take out some spaces here. The substep is a really awesome new feature for this drum machine. I was really excited when they introduced it because it makes it much easier to add ratcheting rhythms without having to be in 30 seconds mode. So when you create substeps, you can hold down the substep button and you'll see on the screen that it shows half, triplets, and fours. What that does is it'll take one step and it'll divide it by that many. So this will make one step into 2, this will make one step into 3, so a triplet, and 4. So I'm just going to stick with the 2 just because, I don't know, I just like the way it sounds. I'm going to dial the volume down a little bit there because I've just been informed that the samples are a little bit louder. It's kind of hard to hear me. So we'll bring that down. So yeah, so you see with the substeps, it's really nice to be able to add ratcheting rhythms very quickly, and kind of adds a little more motion to the beat, get a little more of a groove, and then if you add a little shuffle to that, motion stuff going on there. So we'll stop that. And so now we've got like a basic beat going with some ratcheting rhythms. So now we can take a look at adding in some more of the melodic samples that you're given with this, and also there's also some other various sound effects and stuff that are pretty cool that you can mess with. So let's just select our high tom, because there was no sample entered in there for that, because there's only 2 tom options from the drum track. So what we want to do is we'll go in and we will select, let's see, what do we got here? Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the first pattern, and then I'm going to add some motion recording on the tune like that, like you just saw me do. So very easy to copy. All you have to do is hold down the copy button, and then you select the one that you want to copy from by holding it down, and you'll see variation copy on the screen. Where is it going? Select B, then I wanted to go to C, and I wanted to go to D. Boom. 4 copied over. Hold down your first variation that you want to start, and then you can place them in any order. You can go B, G, C, D if you want to, or however you'd like to lay out your pattern. In this case, I'm just going to go A, B, C, D. So hold down A, press B, C, D, and then we'll get our motion capturing on. Okay, so that's good. Now do we want to start at high and bring it down a little? Yeah, let's do that. Start at high, and I'm just going to hit play, and once I start, I'm going to start moving the tune knob, and it's going to record all of the motion controls that I do. So I've got the motion track armed, and here we go. Okay, that's pretty cool. So let's add in some bass now. So we don't have a rim shot selected, so let's just fire in a bass sample. And a lot of these samples that you're hearing me use right now are, as you can see, they're already predefined kits. The machine comes with a ton of different samples. You've got random voice samples. Right now that sounds kind of funny, but it's just because the tune's turned down. There we go.
Break.
Check.
Hey.
Some generic voice stuff. And there's also just a whole bunch of different synths, pads, leads, and other stuff. A sustained 808. So let's fire some of those in there. So. Okay, so let's get an actual something like a little melodic tune or bass line going. Now, I'd like to say before I continue, one of my gripes with the TR-8S as a sampler is the way that Roland has this thing set up, the tune samples. I understand where they're coming from, why they did it, because they were still trying to encase that 808 magic. But when it comes to samples and tuning, we want to be able to chromatically tune our samples. Having to select between plus and minus 128 with no real indication other than just knowing that it's an octave in either direction is kind of a pain in the butt, because it's really hard to get samples in exact key. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it does take a little bit of work. When I first got the machine, I couldn't jump right in and get anything really melodic to come to life in this thing. But now that I've played with it a bit, I've got a little bit of better grasp on it. But again, Roland, if you're listening, we would really like to see a chromatic tuning option for the samples at least. I don't care if you have it on the drums or not, just the ability to be able to say what note you want it tuned to. And I know that in some cases that doesn't work, but just having it in steps at least, so it's not so all over the place when you're tuning them in. If it just had steps that you could flip through to change the pitch even, would be more helpful than the way it is now. So I'll show you what I'm talking about, because I am going to select something a little more. So let's just select A for now. So you can do per step modification using the motion control function that's built into this. You can do per step modification of the tone. So if you have your beat playing, and you hold, now right now it's just playing through A, so it's going to be kind of annoying to loop. So you hold down the space, or the step that you want to tune, and okay, moving on. Let's get like a synth in here. So what do we got? As you can see, it's not the easiest thing to do to tune these samples in. So again, back to my point. And also, if you'd like to remove the per step tuning or change that you've done, you can hold it down and then just press the clear button and it's gone. So sometimes if you are changing a drum pattern and you had some per step stuff or some motion captured recorded stuff in here, you can erase the pattern and put notes in different places, and you'll find that the pitch is going all over the place, or whatever modified parameters you had before are still there. So yeah, you just hold down the pad that you want to clear it from, and then hit the clear button. Let's just take that out of there. Anyway, we'll go back to this. can add control effects to all of your drums individually, and then there's also I guess what you call a global parameter that you can select the control knobs to all do at the same time. So if you are working with any of the instruments, if you hit Control Select, you'll see that what comes up on the screen is, first you see User, which would be basically you can define in your kits, in the Edit Kit window, you can select, well, pretty much any setting that you can imagine changing about the kit is in here, but you can select what each instrument has as its user-defined control option in here. But there's also a quicker way to get at it that I'll show you here in a minute. And this is also where you can change the color of your faders as well. So if you wanted your bass drum to be I don't know, orange or green or blue or yellow, you can see that you can cycle through actually a pretty good variety of colors. And it's a little bit messy right now, like I don't have any of that stuff organized because I'm just doing this all on the fly just to show you guys how everything works. But normally what I would do is I would group melodic samples and stuff together so that if you were in the dark, it'd be way easier to find in a live performance setting. And you could go, oh, okay, reds are kicks, blues are basses, yellow is synth sounds or whatever. Anyway, it's all a user preference, but yeah, it's a pretty nice feature. I actually like being able to change the color of the faders. I know a lot of people complain about the whole glowing lights thing that Roland has been doing with the IRA stuff, but I actually really like it. I think that it's awesome because it makes it really easy to see stuff in the dark. You can also edit your kit name down here under the kit edit screen. But back to our control select. So this is where you would select basically a global parameter for the control knobs. So currently, every control knob is set to user, so that means that whatever the individual setting is, that's what it is. You can use the value knob to change it through a few different things, such as the instant effects defined in the kit. The depth of the LFO, it does have an LFO built in that will modulate different parameters, and you can also tell it what to modulate in your kit options and instrument options. And then you get your various sends. So if you wanted to, for example, add reverb, but you didn't want reverb to take over the entire drum sequence, say you just wanted like a reverb on the clap, well, you could tell it to use reverb send as its control. You want to go through and then turn all these to 0, and you can save the setting afterwards. I know this is sort of like the building process before you would get ready to play live. You would save this as a kit. It would save all these settings and everything together, and then you would just call on it when you went to perform live. So in this case, we're going to start the pattern. We'll turn our reverb up, and you notice that it's not doing anything right now because we have a reverb setting turned down on all of our instruments. So let's add some reverb to the clap. That's pretty nice. Yeah, so that's how you use the global control select parameters. Now, to select your user options, to change them without having to dive through the kit every time, which could be a pain in the ass, all you have to do is hold down Control Select and then select the instrument that you want to change its user control for. And now you see bass drum says it's turned off. And we can go through a ton of different options. There's coarse tuning, which adds more of like a wider set of octaves for you to tune your samples and stuff through. There's a rate of the LFO. Spread, you can bit reduce it, which is just like a bit crusher. You can change the attack of it in the hold mode, how long it's held for. You can select the filter type that's applied to it and the filter cutoff. And just a bunch of other stuff related to the filter velocity, envelope depth, and decay. So in our case, let's just check out the bit crusher. So hit Control Select. Now we're set to user. So now the controls, all these controls, whatever the user settings are, that's what they'll control now. So if I start this, The LFO is modulating the tune of the kick drum, which is pretty cool. Okay, so so that's how you select your individual controls for any of your separated instruments when it's under the user parameter instead of a global setting. So yeah, I'm going to just go over it again. So all you got to do is hold down Control Select. You would select the instrument that you wanted to change and select the effect that you would like the control knob to change, and away you go. So next thing is we have master effects and an autofill section. Now, I've had a few people ask me on our YouTube channel, and actually I believe also on Facebook as well, about the autofill section. So with the autofill, you actually have two fills that you can program yourself. They don't come pre-filled in, but it's just a place that you can, that you don't have to use any of your variations to take over it. You could use one of your variations as the fill, or you can use the scatter effect, and you can actually change the depth of the scatter to get a more harsh scatter effect, I guess would be the words that I'd use. So I'm going to turn on the autofill. We'll set it to 4 bars. So once it gets through, you'll hear the autofill come in. And right now it's set on our scatter function. And if you hold down manual trigger, you see that the scatter depth actually comes up on here when it's not playing, and it will do it even when it's playing. But this is where you can change how aggressive the scatter is. So I'll just set it to 2 for now, and we'll let it play through. And there you have it. Okay, so that doesn't answer the question. Now, the question that I've been asked is, how do you edit fills 1 and 2, because there's nothing on YouTube that really talks about it a whole lot, and let's say the literature isn't super straightforward on it. So very easy. Actually, it's our good friend the Shift key here again is actually going to be our asset for this one. So all we do is you hold down Shift, and then you hit on autofill, and it will say fill in edit 1. If you use the wheel, you can go to 1, 2, to change your fill. So we can just throw some notes in there. So let's let's see. Let's go to our motion erase, because it sounds like there's some motion going on here. So well, it's just going to erase the motion on fill in 1, which is just Shift and on under motion will let you select which variation, whether you want to erase it all or if you want to take it off a fill. Now, I'm silly. Actually, what we're hearing is the LFO parameter that's applied to the kick drum. My mistake. Anyway, moving on. Back to editing our fill. So we'll leave that. Now let's get some different various ratcheting rhythms in. So we'll go for half, we'll step it up to thirds, and then we'll step it up to fourths. So there. So we'll call that our fill, and actually let's throw in so we've got our fill 1 in place. So we'll hold down this, and we're going to select fill 1 now, and we've got it on our after 4 bars, and so we just hit play. Oops. That'd help if I turn the autofill on. There we go. So yeah, I actually personally, when I use the autofill, I like to have a couple of 6 bars. So I'm going to flip it over to 8 so that it can loop through loop through once completely, because I find that it will cut the D off when it has the autofill set to 4 bars. So there it goes, and I'll go through one more time again. You can use the manual trigger button, of course, to trigger your fill whenever you want your beat. Although sometimes if you place it in the wrong position, it actually just tends to sound foolish, because it will trigger, and then it'll trigger it again when the autofill comes through. So you're best off to really use the manual trigger with it off. Okay, so yeah, so that's how you edit your fills 1 and 2. Again, I'm going to go over it one more time. So you hold down Shift, you press on, and then it will ask you, do you want to edit the first or the second fill? It's just that easy. And then when you're done, you can back out by holding Shift and the same button, turn your fill on, and you hold down the on key. At the bottom, you can see it's labeled here, fill 1, 2, or scatter. And if you want to edit the depth of the scatter, again, you select scatter, hold down manual trigger, and then you can adjust it with the knob. So I'm just going to put that back on our fill 1. So our master effects section, and there's some pretty cool master effects. Actually, I really like the sideband filter a lot, and they give you a lot of parameters that you can modify to make the effect more aggressive, or just shape the sound of it to more of your liking, rather than just being handed like, here's some effects, hope they sound good enough. They actually give you a lot of options for modifying that stuff. So if we hold down Shift and select our master effects, we'll see that currently the sideband filter is actually what is selected. And you can select what that controls, the balance of it, and then some various other settings here and gains. The sideband filter is pretty sweet. I'll take you through what you've got for options. So you've got a high pass filter, you've got a low pass filter, you've got a high pass, low pass, which means that when the knob is at center, it's off. When you turn it to all the way to the left, it will use the low pass filter, and all the way to the right is high pass filter, for anybody that wasn't aware. You've got a high boost and a low boost, so that's just like EQ boosting of the highs and lows, depending on which one you select. And also, they've got the split knob for that as well. We've got isolator, we've got transient 1 and 2, we've got a compressor, and overdrive, and drive, and distortion, fuzz, a bit crusher, phaser, flanger, sideband filter, and noise. Now, I really like the sideband filter personally. It's all obviously going to be in preference of what you like, but I like turning it right up. And we get our beat loop in here. Jump me into this. There we go. So I'm going to just start the beat, and I'm going to bring the sideband filter in. And I've got to turn to max, so when it starts, you'll see what I'm talking about. So that's the master effects. Depending on which effect you select, you're given different options for editing. You can change the sample rate of the bit crusher and the balance of it, the filter. There's just an endless amount of parameters for every effect that you could imagine on here. And the effects sound really good. Like Roland did a really good job at just dialing that stuff in and customizing it so that it fits the drum machine a little bit better. I really appreciate that they've taken the effects section a little more seriously. I had the TR-8 before this. I wasn't an overly big fan of the reverbs and the delays on it. It seems like they've really gotten it to sound a lot nicer with this machine. I found that they were kind of lacking on the older TR-8, so that's just my 2 cents on it. I'm sure everybody's got their own opinions on it, but personally, that's just the way that I felt. The delay, I find the delay pretty awesome for using on your synths or basses or melodic sounds samples that you've selected. So let's go and let's get out of this. We'll go back to sample. Let's find, where did I put that organ bass at? Okay. So let's get a delay on that. So we'll hit our control select, and what I want to do is I want to select our delay send, and I'm just going to turn it down for everything. Okay, and then we'll on the autofill. Actually, we'll put it to 8. I didn't realize I only had it on 2. So let's add a little bit more delay to that. So we'll turn their delay send up. You can really use the velocity pad, aside from just being very cool to add velocity controlled steps, super helpful for adjusting sounds. Again, you can use the instrument play to do the same thing, but I just really like the ability to hit it louder and softer. Kind of gives you a better idea of what it's going to sound like depending on the volume levels and all of that. So I'd like to get a nice long delay. Yeah, so that's the delay. Again, using the control select for the global function of delay send, turning the delays off on everything except for what you want it to be delayed on is probably the best way to really utilize the effects. The cool thing too is once you've selected that, you can flip this back to whatever. It maintains that delay setting, even though we've switched it back to user control, which could be, again, whatever you want. I think we could even So yeah, using the global effects with the control select to turn everything off except for the drums or sample sounds that you want to have the effects on is a really cool way to just mess with certain sounds to create more like rhythmic sounds and better melodies, stuff like that. It just makes it more fuller sounding. You can really blend stuff together, and it's not like this annoying delay on everything or reverb on everything or what have you. Yeah, so one thing that I forgot to mention, actually, I'm kind of backpedaling here. On the autofill, I had said that you could use the variations for fills, and that's true. If you hold down on, you've got the 3 down here, but you've noticed that all your variations are blinking too, and you can select it to play any one of these variations. It's just nice to use fills 1 and 2 in order to not use up any of your space for creating entire tracks on this thing. Because having 8 variations is awesome. It's really, really great, especially with the autofill. We could use this, for example, we could use this for like a verse in a track, and then we could come down to E, F, G, and H, or E and F, and create a shorter pattern for the hook, and then maybe like G and H for some sort of a breakdown and a little synth solo or something like that, just to kind of give you an idea of exactly what you could use it for. You can use it for whatever you want, but that's just an example of how you could use it to be more effective in your studio. So Just trying to think here of stuff that I haven't covered yet. So I'm not going to really bother covering the accent stuff. It works exactly the same as it did on the TR-8. It's just a matter of selecting the steps that you want to have to accent to increase the volume, and then it will up it in those individual spots. Now you can do weak beats by holding down the drum and then pressing the step. You've got two ranges for your weak beats, and then also you can do what they call flams by holding the sub-step. I believe it's. Oh, sorry. You press Shift and sub-step. That Shift key again will set you to flam, and it will create these little like quick triggered flams, and you can also change the length of those flams, I believe, in your kit settings, if I remember correctly. Let's see. I believe it's in here, but I could be wrong. Oh, maybe per instrument, actually. Is it in here? I mean, I hardly ever use them, but it is there, and it basically just does like a quick double up trigger. You can change the length of the flams depending. It's in the owner's manual. Again, I apologize, I don't really use it all that often, but it is there, and it's just Shift sub-step to switch over to flams, and then those notes come in purple. Okay, so we've covered importing samples. Deleting samples is something that I didn't cover, but it's just as easy as selecting delete. You can, it's just as easy as selecting delete and then scrolling through the various names. You just have to know the name of the sample that you've imported in order to select delete the right one, I guess. Okay, so we have covered accents, reverb, delays, master effects, the autofill section, how to edit your two autofills and change the depth of the scatter. We've covered global effects in the controller select. We've covered individual effects for controls. We've covered importing samples, deleting samples, categorizing and moving samples. We've shown how to go to a blank kit, gone through and switched instruments to whatever we like, selected through some of the various samples that Roland has given, showed how the velocity pad can be very useful for not only inputting steps in various velocities, but also for testing sounds, modifying, adding effects, just to see what things sound like. I've gone through the variations, we've gone through the motion controls, we've gone through the per step motion controls. Pretty much any of the settings, like any of the more in-depth stuff that you're looking to, that you would probably want to set up while you're building your kit, it can all be found either under your kit edit window, your instrument edit window, or I'm tongue-tied there. Instrument edit window or your sample edit window. So Shift accesses all those. So there's your sample edit, you've got your instrument edit, and you've got your kit edit by just holding down Shift to access those. And that's where you're going to find any of the more in-depth stuff that would be more for like building and customizing a kit to get ready to create something to save and then perform it live or record it into your DAW or whatever you're going to be doing with it. Another thing that I didn't really cover, pretty simple function but very useful, is, and I like how easy it is to access, because on the TR-8S when you wanted to part mute, you either had to close your faders or you had to switch to instrument play, then select mute on the last step. It would change everything, all these to blue, and you could turn them off that way. With this machine, they've actually added just a mute button now, and it flips all your faders over to one color, and they turns the light off on them, so that if you're playing in the dark, you can see. yeah, so that's how you use the part mute. Again, if you were going to be building up your beat in a live scenario, it's really awesome to just not have to worry about messing with your faders if you've got them in a position that you like, and rather than just cutting out the parts by muting them. Shuffle knob's exactly the same as the TR-8 was. It's just basically in a percentage going from 0 to 127 or 128 and minus 100. That's actually weird. I just never realized it only goes to 127 in one way, 128 in the other. Potentially a bug there, Roland. Probably should go to 128 in both directions. Yeah, so I was asked in a YouTube question how this would compare to the Volca sample. And I would say that the two really aren't super comparable, other than that they're both basically step sequencers that allow you to input samples to create rhythms and sounds. The audio quality of this is also obviously extremely of a higher caliber than the Volca sample. I think the Volca sample only comes in at like 33 kilohertz, so it gets like a little more of a vintage tone to it. And it doesn't have a way to really import samples easily like this does, and with only 4 megabytes in it, it's not, overly filled with storage, whereas with this particular machine, you can have 300 seconds of stereo samples or 600 seconds of mono samples. And I believe that even with the mono samples, it just projects them out in stereo, so it's just the same sample out of both speakers basically that you were hearing, rather than having a variation from left to right or whatever in your stereo sample. But yeah, for a beginner to get their hands on this thing, I know it can seem a little bit intimidating, but honestly, like right out of the box, it's really easy to use, and it's like the controls are just right in front of you. Everything's very easy to grab. Aside from just learning that the shift key is your best friend on this thing, it's not an overly complicated machine to use, and anybody can pretty much pick this thing up with little experience and get it to do something. As long as you can keep time, you have a knowledge of rhythm, then you should be fine to use this, whether you're an advanced user or a more beginner user. And honestly, like the manual that they give you for this thing is, I know that a lot of these pages are usually a waste of time, but they actually give you quite a comprehensive manual with this thing, which is awesome. So like normally you get like one or two pages, but like all those pages are actually pages in English on this thing. So I mean, it has various other languages as well, but for them to really go in that in depth is really good of them, because I find it to be a pain in the ass when they sell you something and then they say, here's a quick start guide, visit our website for the real guide. Well, why can't you just give me the real guide in the box? I paid $1,000 for the machine. So yeah, anyway, I digress. So my point is, other than them basically being step sequencers and being able to trigger samples, they're not overly the same. And this is super easy and hands-on for anyone to jump into. It's like, when you first turn it on, if you go to a blank kit, they already have like 808 sounds and stuff in there. And as well as if you select kits, I mean, there's a ton of kits on this thing. There's just, you've got your ACB stuff, you've got your 808, 909, 707, 727, 606, 626, and then you've just got, a plethora of different kits that Roland has created right out of the box for you. So for the beginner that's not super savvy on picking what samples they want, or even just building a kit, there's a lot of kits that you can actually just go through and mess around with. Figure stuff out, play with the motion controls, and find things that you like, and then from there you can follow this guide for initializing the patch, initializing the kit, and then just creating something of your own. So I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but for beginners or for more advanced users, this machine is really easy to use, and I think that they've done an excellent job. So some of the stuff, like I said, that I had kind of issues with, when you import samples, how you can't import directly into categories. You have to import them to the import category and then build name a category and then one by one move everything. I find that to be a bit of a pain in the butt. There's something else that I should cover on this because I found it to be kind of annoying. It turns out that there's actually just a really simple way to fix the problem. Everybody knows with the 808 909 that the close hi-hat will actually stop the open hi-hat from sounding. And yeah, we understand that that's how the old drum machines worked, but it would be nice in 2018 to be able to change that. And I actually contacted the Roland Ira Facebook page, and I've contacted them a few times for different things that I'd like to see changed and made suggestions, and they're actually very helpful. Whoever's on the other end typing, they've always given me a reply, told me that it's been submitted, or they've given me a solution. So in this case, I noticed that I was using closed hi-hats, and I had a sample in the open hi-hat spot, and it wouldn't play for most of the time, and I couldn't figure out why, and then I realized, oh, it's cutting it out, even though it's a sample. That doesn't make any sense. So if you want to stop that from happening, you can do this on any of the kits. If you hit Shift Kit, and then you come down to mute, you can tell it to mute one drum off of another drum for any one of them, or you can turn it off. So in this case, it's already been turned off, but in my case, the open hi-hat was actually selected to turn off from the closed hi-hat, just like that. So it's just a matter of hitting Shift, Kit, scrolling through down to mute, and you can use your Shift key to change the category, so it makes it way easier and way faster to get through this stuff. You can go down and then select the part mute that you want to turn off, turn it off, and away you go. So yeah, that's something that I found to be kind of annoying, and the Roland Ira team actually really helped out with. And I really appreciated the help because I was kind of thinking, like, you got to be kidding me. By this point, they should have been able to fix this. Now, I've pretty much covered anything that I could think of that they may have had difficulty with. But if I didn't cover something that you'd really like to know about, or you've got one and you're trying to figure it out, because I've spent some time with the machine, and I'm sure there's probably still some stuff even that I'm not covering here. Just shoot us a comment below, or if you're watching this on Facebook Live, because this will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, just comment on the video on Facebook Live, and we'll go through the comments, and we'll try to do like a Q&A on our Facebook page for anything that we didn't cover. And try to get everybody more informed, and then that way you can make an informed decision if you want to buy it, or if you have it, it will help your workflow. I just want to thank everybody who has taken the time to watch the live stream today. Really appreciate the love and support from everybody, and it's really overwhelming how many people are actually interested in kind of watching this stuff and taking it on with us. So. Just want to let everybody know that we really appreciate it from me and Dr. Z. We're going to keep trying to get stuff like this out, more content. We're going to do some other synth reviews. I'd like to do a review on the System 8 and talk about some of the stuff that I really like about it and some of the stuff that I don't really like about it. But anyway. I digress. So I'm going to let you guys go. And again, if you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and we will do our best to cover them for you. Thanks, and have a good one.